chase bees around under the flag of the bee's knees. First off, I want to give some thanks. Thank you for the council for letting me speak tonight. I want to thank Ed and Mary Wynn. They have been outstanding the whole 4 years we've had these. Could not ask for better neighbors. And they have beautiful gardens, so bees like them. Paul and Janet Spadowski, my neighbors on the other side, as good of people as you ever meet. Miss Margaret Woods, who's on the other side of the bees, good as gold. So I have 3 neighbors that have been with bees for 4 years since we started.
4.
Yeah, that's right, 4 neighbors. Across the street, yeah, that's right. And also want to thank Mr. Henry Burrows. He actually owns the lot that we have the second set of hives on, right there at Waters and Lewis. When I approached him in the fall, I really didn't know him that well, shame on me. And I heard he owned that lot of land, and I asked him, would you be okay if I added more hives? Because I'd love to be able to give more honey to our neighbors. And since we've had it, I've gladly shared honey with our direct neighbors, just for them being so accommodating. Definitely want to thank all the support we've gotten, local, state, national. It's been really humbling that people care about bees. It's not about me, it's not about the bee's needs, it's about bees. That's long and short of it. I really had to think about the tone I wanted to take tonight. For days, my wife and I were hurt how everything has transpired. And I really took a moment, thought about it, prayed about it last night, and completely changed my demeanor. I don't want this to be hostile. I don't want any kind of bad blood between our business and our name and the city. I'd rather take a tone of awareness, education, knowledge, more importantly. I got into beekeeping about 4 years ago. Before that, I'd never given any thought to what bees do for our ecosystem and humanity, let alone dangers they face from pests, pesticides, and human ignorance, me included. Once I started learning and seeing firsthand what these amazing creatures that God has provided for us do each and every day, I was hooked. I think every person at some point in their lives looks for ways to give back and make a difference. So, me being 44, I've been in corporate America, and I'm in there now. That's my primary job. It's easy to say, hey, I'm going to donate some money, or I'll give a tithe, or I'll help at the soup kitchen, or whatever your passion is. And for me, I really didn't have that one thing, and for me, it was beekeeping. And that, for me, what I take for beekeeping is what I can give back to my community. So I was hooked. I think every person, like I say, thinks of a way they can make a difference. And that's like that there's many beekeepers in here. That's the primary reason beekeepers do it. They don't do it for accolades. We don't do it for financial gain. We do it to make a difference. It is true, we have an LLC. So technically, we are a business. When I started beekeeping, I have a business background. I still am in business. And I was like, oh, gosh darn, this is dang expensive. And any beekeeper in here will tell you it is the most expensive hobby you'll ever will think about getting into. And I was like, there's got to be a way for a tax write-off just to cover, my expenses. So I got with my accountant, Cindy Hart, H&R Block. Most of you probably already know her or know her name. And she said, well, if you're generating profit, it's a business. So how we started our business, if you look at our LLC, it's the Bee's Knees Beehive installations and service, and honey at the end. What we do is like a pool service or a lawn care service. How we started, people would come to us, and everybody loves bees. If I took a poll, 90% of y'all would say, man, I love bees, they're fascinating. Probably that same 90% would say, I'm petrified of them. So that's where we started the business model, and what we do is we set up backyard bees, we take care of them, the customer owns them, they own the bees, the boxes, they pay us for a service, just like a lawn care service or a pool service. And I've got some of our customers and beekeepers, I call them beekeepers, it's their bees, they're beekeepers. We've done it for 4 years, and so that is our primary source of income. It's enough to pay for what we do and expand the business. Honey is a byproduct. Bees, that's what they do. Bees pollinate, they make honey, they make more bees. That's their whole life before they die. So that being said, once we started generating honey, because it wasn't our primary revenue stream, we knew we had to build a facility and beekeepers call it a honey house or a honey shack. And that's where you spin the honey, you bottle it. It's a storage facility. It's like a kitchen with no oven, obviously. So 5 miles out in the city off of Burkhalter and Highway 80. My father-in-law has about 60 acres, Dr. Chip Brick, and he said we can put it here. I went to the county, got all the permits. One of the council members who is not here signed the permit for us to build this facility. Because I knew that we would not be doing any processing in Brooklet. We don't do any front door sales. We don't do any signage. If you drove by our house, you would not know we have bees. You definitely wouldn't know we sell honey, okay? We partner with local stores, and that's where our honey is. It's all on consignment. So if someone calls me and says, hey, I'd like some honey, go see Carla at Southeast Tire. She'll hook you up. Go see Joshua at Southeast Pharmacy. He'll hook you up. Pretty soon it'll be go see the peanut stand. James will hook you up, okay? I will gladly pay a commission to help advertise and promote other local businesses. We try and purchase everything that we use for the business from other beekeepers, from local businesses. Catalyst gets most of my money. So most every check that goes out of our business goes to Catalyst Promotions, and it has for years, and they've done a great job, and I gladly write that check. So the only thing we use our home for is we had to have a physical address for our LLC. They wouldn't let us use a post office box. So that we had to have a physical address, so we used our 200 South Cromley. The only thing we do there is emailing. We have our computer. We send out bills. We read emails from customers or clients or order needs that we need from supplies. There's no processing. There's no bottling. I don't even have one bottle of honey for sale in my home. All I have is a little bit in the cupboard that we use personally. And honestly, honey is a small portion of what we do. We're not a B&G, we're not a Franklin Honey, we're not a big player in the honey market. We're local. We support the Peanut Festival. We love being a Brooklet company. We love being Brooklet Honey. We've had many offers since this all started, unfortunately. Plenty of citizens, communities, you name it. You can move your bees here. We want them. Come to us. We'll take them. I don't want that. I've lived here for 13 years. I've lived in Bullitt County almost my entire life. It was all spent in Statesboro. I'm sorry. But I love Bullitt County and I love Brooklet. I wouldn't stay here if I didn't. I like going to festivals, and it may be Portage, it could be somewhere in Pooler, and we're our honey booth, and our label says Brooklet Honey. Doesn't say Stilson, no offense, Scott. Doesn't say Register, doesn't say, Rankin, sorry. So I like advertising our city, and I want to continue to do that. So that being said, just a little bit of facts about bees. As people don't know about bees, I didn't up until about 4 years ago. A bee flies up to about 3 miles. Do y'all know the square miles of Brooklet? 3.4. So those bees on Louisville or Lewis Street are covering the entire city of Brooklet. They're pollinating every flower. So when flowers are blooming, one bee will visit 2,000 flowers in a day. And it doesn't go, hey, that's a government flower, that's a private citizen flower, that's a private business flower, that's a weed, I'm sorry. If it's got nectar and it can be pollinated, that bee is going to it. So that's a service that those bees are providing for the entire city. Roughly, what, 1,500 citizens in our city limits. Not to mention the surrounding cotton. And those of you who, and I never knew this till recently, bees like cotton. Bees really like cotton. And cotton farmers like bees because they wear them things out. So what we're asking is we'd love to keep our bees, Brooklet bees. We really don't want them getting sprayed. The whole dust up really started with the kind of confusion from the letter. When we got the initial spraying letter, it was, and don't get me wrong, I really appreciated the letter. I was like, wow, they remembered I had bees. Letting y'all letting me know, protect my bees. But y'all have not sprayed that. Basically, it only affects myself and the winds, the one section that we don't want sprayed. The hives that are over off of Waters and Lewis are far enough back. I'm not as worried about them. But the hives that are in the backyard that have been there for 4 years, it's only about 12 feet from the road. And I'm worried about the drift. But what was confusing about the letter was we'll start spraying on Mondays and Thursdays. And then if there's bad weather, it'll be Tuesdays and Fridays.
Yeah.
But it didn't say what the bad weather was. So, and it didn't say, hey, if it's, and it didn't, so with me as a beekeeper, it's like, okay, do I leave them open for 2 days or, so I didn't know what was considered bad weather, whether, because I don't know anything about fog.
Weather,
So.
I was thinking when they told me, asked me to write the letter, was, of course, we don't spray when it's raining.
Wind and rain.
And
Right.
then when the wind is up so high, we don't spray.
Right, and that's where I made the initial call, hey, can we please not spray, and then when it was come to the town hall meeting, had no problem with that, and we petitioned, we went to every neighbor from Waters all the way to Cromley, so all the way down Lewis. I've got them, I think it's 9 or 10 households plus a couple that are on Cromley. I'm not even concerned about Cromley. Cromley is the main road that the bees are not even close to Cromley. That was never an issue. It's really the section where Miss Margaret Woods lives, and Ed and Mary Wynn and myself. It's 42 feet of privacy fence, but if you really want to be cautious, it's from her driveway, Miss Woods, to Cromley. So say 100 feet. And both the Winds and Miss Woods have signs saying we're fine not spraying. So that's where we're here today.
Public Works will not spray on Lewis past College.
Mhm.
And we mark the road from your corner of your property in Lewis, 100 feet up Cromley, and from the other corner of your property, 100 feet down Cromley.
Right.
And in that area, our truck will not spray. You may see a fog coming out of the truck when it goes down Lewis. That is not pesticide.
And my neighbor, Mr. Spadowski, I was at work in Savannah, and Mr. Spadowski said, hey, they marked off the road for you. And I was like, great. And then we got the letter saying, get out. So that's where I was like, oh, that's where everything went south.
Yeah, we got the gun on that.
And it was, and my wife was really hurt, and it was just kind of a slap. And now if that being said, if we need to pay, if there needs to be some kind of a fee for us having bees, or if there's something that we need to do that, to stay where we're at, we'd love to. We don't want to have to move our bees. We like making our neighbors happy. I like seeing the winds, get their honey and keep because I want them to keep planting flowers because they do a great job. So, but that's where we're at. We want resolution. We don't want this to go any farther. And and I know there's been some talk. Hey, they lawyered up. Once we got the letter, we were scared. I did contact a lawyer, and then I backed off. I was like, if the city doesn't want us, I'm not gonna spend $5,000 of business money that we don't have. I mean, we don't have that much money to be, it's, if we turn $500 profit at the end of the year, I'm happy,
To enhance those figures you gave a little bit ago, actually, one hive can have as many as 25,000 forager bees.
Yeah,
And they
50,000 total.
They can make 1 to 10 trips a day, and they pollinate over 50 to 1,000 flowers in each trip. And you start multiplying all those different numbers up, you get up into millions of flowers, and that's gonna take them further than Brooklet. My concern for your bees is that that truck that we spray with doesn't put out what looks like a fog that dissipates. It's actually microscopic driplets that land and sit. Now, we won't spray until total darkness, because that's when the bees are dormant. We go, it has to be more than 1 mile an hour, or all we do is spray the truck. And it has to be less than 10 mile an hour to prevent carriage of the pesticide. So we're very strict to stay in those parameters. And if they're en route spraying, and for some reason, like in Georgia, the wind does pick up or whatever, they'll shut down and go back to the shop.
Right.
The bees pollinate over $15 billion worth of food in the United States every year. I mean, there's 4,000 species of bees. No honeybees on the endangered list, never has been. And there's only 8 species of bumblebees on the endangered list. 6 of those are in Hawaii. I love honey. I eat honey all the time. And I don't think, I'm really disappointed in, because the first time that this came up, everybody said Brooklet wants to kill the bees. And that's no further from the truth than you can get. We don't want to do that. In fact, years ago, when you said, hey, you guys, please don't spray around my property, you guys started shutting that spray
They
off
sure did.
when they came to your property.
Right.
That's been going on for years.
And that's where I just wanted a continuation of that same agreement.
Well, the only difference that changed, Mr. Dinello, and we got concerned for our customers who pay for mosquito spray, is that when you put them out in the field, in my eyes, a couple problems came up. First of all, we shut off the sprayer that these customers over here, of which I guess you've talked to since, they're not getting any mosquito spray. The other problem that I have personally is an attractive nuisance. I don't know how many children there are really that play around that area.
None.
Okay, but if a
There's
child,
2 of them right there.
if a child,
I brought live children.
live specimen,
Live
I'm just
specimen.
concerned that if a child or children get curious, there could be a problem, because there's no protection from the human contact. And, so no, I don't kill bees.
So, I actually heard that was a concern, and had I been approached about that, I obviously would have had to have gotten permission from Henry Burroughs, because it's his land. I would have not had a problem with that at all. I would have not had a problem with signage, hey, bees, da-da-da. A lot of beekeepers do that, but the lawyer your attorney might be able to answer that. I've heard that can, is kind of like beware of dog. You're kind of accepting the fact that, they're aggressive. I don't know if that's true or not. I've heard that. I'm not a lawyer, so. But I mean, I would have had no problem putting signs up saying bees, apiary, live bees, caution, a fence. That would have not been an issue at all. Apparently, if Mr. Henry approved it.
Well, our attorney has some comments to make on that situation right now.
Well, I did want to say that, and reiterate what Councilman Stanhope said, I don't think anybody feels in the city that bees are bad. Bees are very beneficial, and we need bees. The whole question is, where should the bees be located, and how can we accomplish that under the zoning ordinance? The city can't just willy-nilly say, we like you, and so we're not gonna enforce the city's ordinance against you because we like you. I mean, that's not.
And I have no problem with that. I would love to be on that panel or have other beekeepers that sit down and write an ordinance that, that helps everybody. Because, it's amazing how as I've gotten into beekeeping, all of, generations prior to me said, man, when I grew up as a kid, there was every farm, every house had a beehive. You know, my father-in-law, I mean, I never knew this. Like, my father was a beekeeper. You know, I mean, everybody that grew up, people raise their hands here, I grew up around bees. We had bees. You don't see that now.
Right.
It's not, I mean, I love my kids to death. I got a dragon to put honey in a bottle. They ain't gonna suit up and play with bees. You know, there's not many beekeepers, you know, and so at some point we have to say, you know, we need to, you know, as a community, set regulations. I have no problem with that. But it doesn't need to be so impossible that the average person couldn't take up beekeeping in a responsible way.
Well, what I wanted to do is give a short dissertation, if I might, Mr. Mayor, hopefully not too long, but so that I hope it's helpful.
It's gonna be long.
A lawyer's are long-winded, right? But
Make it short.
hopefully this will be of some help so you can see where the city's coming from from a legal standpoint and what the legal obligations that the city has under enforcing ordinances. The zoning administrator has a legal duty to enforce the city's zoning ordinance as it is drafted. The role of the mayor and council is that they have authority to pass a zoning ordinance. They have authority to amend the zoning ordinance. They don't have authority to just say, we're not gonna enforce the zoning ordinance. They can change it, but it's not legal for them to just say, we're not gonna enforce this because we like Mr. Dinello or we like bees or whatever it might be. So I have been looking to see if there is a way under the city zoning ordinance as drafted or as it could possibly be changed if the council wants to consider this, to allow the beekeeping operation to continue. But before I get to that, let me say this. It is my opinion that your current operation is in violation of the zoning ordinance as it is written. But I do think there's a way to maybe get to where you want to get if the council approves it. All right, under the current zoning ordinance, let me start by saying what the purpose of zoning is. That's found in section 1-4 of the city zoning ordinance, and it's really true of all zoning ordinances. It's to promote desirable living conditions. Part of the purposes are to sustain and stabilize neighborhoods, to protect against depreciation, to promote general health and welfare in the use and development of land. In general, what you want is you want compatible uses in specific districts. You don't want incompatible uses that are close to one another. So in furtherance of those purposes, the city has established certain zoning districts. You've got residential districts, you've got commercial districts, you've got industrial districts, and you have an agricultural district. The ones that really we're involved with here would be possibly an agricultural district and an R1 residential district. So what are the purposes of an agricultural district? Now, you're in an R1 district, you're not in an agricultural district. But the purposes of an agricultural district are, number one, single-family residential areas. Number two, you generally would have a 3-acre minimum lot size, and it permits agricultural uses. Examples would be barns, silos, farm buildings. It allows single-family dwellings, it allows farmlands, and it allows livestock. So it would be my opinion that under the current zoning ordinance, your bee operation could be located as a matter of right in an agricultural zone if that's what you were in, but you're not. So what about a single-family residential district? And that's what you're in, is an R1 zone. The purposes of a single residential district are to provide for single residential areas, and importantly, to protect from the encroachment of those uses that are incompatible to a desirable residential environment. So those are the purposes. The examples of uses as a matter of right in an R1 zone would be single-family residential dwellings, Accessory uses customarily incidental to a residential use such as garages, storage buildings, pool houses, that kind of thing. So your operation, in my opinion, under the zoning ordinance is not allowed as a matter of right. But here's the way we might get to where you want to get to if the council likes this idea. You have in these zoning districts permitted uses that are a matter of right, which is what I just mentioned, but there are also certain uses that can be special exceptions in certain districts. Fortunately, in this situation, one of the special exceptions is farmlands. I think your operation is an agricultural type use, and in the definition of farm, it provides for agricultural uses. Now, what has to happen for a special exception to be allowed is there is a procedure that has to you have to go through. You would have to make application to the city to have a special use exception in an R1 district for farming agricultural purposes. That has to be referred to the planning commission. They would have to advertise it, post it, and have a hearing on it, and the adjoining neighbors would be notified. And it's my understanding, is this correct, that your neighbors are in favor of this?
100%.
All right, so they would be notified, they would have an opportunity to come to the hearing, as would any other resident in the city, and voice their opinion at the hearing as to, whether they thought this was an appropriate use in a residential zone for that property. And the planning commission would then make a recommendation to council based upon certain factors that are in the special use exception. Then the council itself would have to do the same thing. It would have to post the property, advertise it, have a public hearing on it where the public can come in and comment on it. And then if it's determined after all that your use is appropriate where you have it, and your neighbors being in favor of it would obviously be beneficial to your cause, then it could be allowed as a special use exception in an R1 district. And in that way, the council wouldn't have to make any changes to the zoning ordinance, or really do anything else. It would just be the special exception procedure that is already provided for in the existing zoning ordinance. So that's probably the best way to go, I would think. And you have a right to apply for that at any time.
More importantly, do we have a stay on the legal letter?
Well, I was going to suggest if you like that idea.
I do.
That they give you time to go through that procedure, and if it's successful, then that will solve the problem. If it's not successful, then obviously there's still the issue of
Sure.
enforcement under the zoning ordinance. So I think that the options of the city would be to continue with the enforcement as has been begun. Another option, you have the power to change the zoning ordinance to allow beekeeping as a hobby in an R1 district as a matter of right. I suspect there's some areas in the city where that might not be a popular idea, but I don't know that. Everybody may be in favor of that, I don't know. But, you would actually have to change the zoning ordinance to do that. And of course have the hearings and post, advertise and all that kind of stuff. A possible last option would be to add commercial beekeeping to the home occupation portion of the ordinance, which I really don't think is a great idea because you don't have the hearings and the input from the public as you do in this other procedure. And I would think this would be a controversial subject in certain areas of the city where obviously it's not in this area. But I would think, to me, the first option is the better option. That would be my opinion.
I have a couple of questions, Mr. Dinello.
Yes, sir.
How much growth do you expect to have at your current?
So here's the and I'm glad Scott's here. Scott Stringer's here. So when we started this business model, it really was a way to finance beekeeping. You know, I didn't really want to go to a bank and go, hey, I'm a 6-month beekeeper, give me $20,000. You know, I'm good for it. You know, I didn't want to put my house in collateral, didn't want to put my cars in collateral. I didn't know if the business model would take off. You know, who's ever heard of people paying? I went to one of your peers, and he laughed me out of the office. Who the blank is going to pay you to put bees in their backyard? He's a very well-to-do attorney in town, in Statesboro. And now we're at 50+ beehives that we've installed. I had to break off all of my Bryan County and Chatham County and Effingham County customers to Scott. And Scott took our business model. He lives out in Stilson, and he's doing the same thing. And I've had beekeepers from around the country contact me. Hey, what are you doing? Because up until now, the only way for a beekeeper to make a living or generate a lot of profit is selling honey, selling bees, or pollination. When you have 12 hives, when I started with, eight hives, when we first started the first year, how many beehives am I going to sell out of 8 hives? How much honey am I going to make? So we found a back door, and we came up with the backyard installation. So to your point with the growth, there is no growth opportunity for the installation side or the honey, because it's not my full-time job. And beekeeping is immensely labor intensive. There's Saturdays or Sundays or whatever day of the week, usually it's a weekend because I have a full-time job during the week in Savannah. I might be, if it's a day I've got to come see, 10 of my clients, and I've got to get into, 10 or 15 of my hives that are out there at the Braes off of Burkhalter, I might be working 10-hour day in beehives.
There's been growth since 2006. We've gone from 2.4 million hives to 2.7 million in the U.S.
And I'm talking from my business model.
Yeah.
My business model or my business is about maxed out. I can only do so much. And as far as Brooklet's concerned, I'm not going anywhere else in Brooklet with hives. I'm not going to put any more on Henry's land. It's not big enough. The only way there would be any more growth in Brooklet is if y'all said, hey, I like this idea, and we want beehives in a park or in an empty lot or whatever. There's no more growth for me because I can't physically do it.
Have you experienced any colony collapse disorder?
So I've had bigger problems that beekeepers face are varroa mites.
Yeah.
And varroa mites are a nasty, nasty creature that is not indigenous to the United States. It was brought here from Asia some years ago.
Yeah, Korean mites too.
Yeah, and varroa mites are very destructive to a hive. So all smart beekeepers treat for them. Some over-treat, some under-treat, some don't treat at all. I try and be somewhere in the middle. That goes back to, bees face a lot of turmoil. But yeah, I have had colonies where everything's going great, and then bam. The big thing was a snowstorm. On average, I lose, and I don't count a hive getting lost during the spring and summer as a loss, because I usually can catch a swarm or do a split or replace that hive. What I call a loss is anything that I go into winter with, which is for me is Thanksgiving. Whatever hives I have that go into Thanksgiving, into winter, and then I pop those hives open basically February 1st. So I consider that Thanksgiving to February 1st is my window to see how many hives I lost. On average, on a good year, it's about 6 to 10% loss for me. It varies, but when we had the snowstorm, we had 25%. 25% of our hives, dead.
We got as high as 30% cross country.
I'm beating the average.
You sure?
Y'all have a great beekeeper in this town, don't you?
The reason I asked that question, sir, is one of the things that causes at CCD is your forager bees pick up a minute amount of this insecticide pellets, whatever you want to call them, spread all across the city on plants and flowers and such. And your forager bees will pick up that little tiny bit of that, bring it back to the brood, and then, after a period of time, they say, hey, we're tired of this, they leave the hive. And I don't know what rebuilding time on hive is, or,
It depends on time of year. So, the issue you have, and I don't wanna get into too much beekeeping 101, but, if it's from, let's say Valentine's Day to end of August versus September, middle of September, they're still drones. What happens when the bees go into basically October, depending on depending on where you're at in the weather conditions, but basically let's say October, they kick all the drones out of the hive. So being a drone is a great life till it's not. And they kick the drones out of the hive and they let them die, okay? Well, you have to have drones to mate a queen. So if you have a hive that goes queenless, late September, late August, you're in trouble. And that's where you have to go to another beekeeper that sells queens, but they stop selling queens once you get into September. So basically, if you have a hive that's in trouble, say September, it's not gonna make it. If it has no queen or not enough bees, you've gotta blend it with another strong hive to get them through the winter. So to your question, it depends on the time of year. So if I have a hive that's in trouble like right now, I can fix it. I can fix it like that. I can pull frames from 10 or 15 other hives and get them up to full strength.
so your intention is not to have a great deal of growth.
For me, no, I can't. So honestly, that's why I shaved off 10 or so customers to Scott to help him out, because he's a beekeeper, and I've had other beekeepers. To be honest with you, here's breaking news. We're not taking on any new customers, installation customers next year. We're done with that part of it. We're gonna grandfather in who we have. We're gonna take care of those hives. It's just, it's too labor intensive, and we're gonna stick with the 20 or so customers that we have, still some Brooklet, Statesboro Register. I have a couple in Newington. That's where we're at. I do the Georgia Southern Bees, Botanical Gardens. Up until we got in there, they had died every year, and I've got 2 hives out there now that are rocking and rolling.
Would you be in favor of putting some type of protective barrier up?
Assuming Mr. Burrows okays it, yeah.
So,
Okay, thank you for the communication. What's our first step, you?
well, I have a couple questions.
Very good, go.
I have and they're kind of basic, but my question about growth would be, do you plan to expand the number of hives or colonies, whatever, that you have in your yard?
No, I'll probably decrease it, honestly.
Okay.
I'll probably go back down to 4, and I'm at 7 right now. I'll probably phase out. What I've been doing, honestly, is so with the nature of the business, the installation piece, some of our customers only have 1 hive. So if you know anything about beekeeping, you never have 1 hive. Okay, you're asking to have horrible experiences as a beekeeper. So what we've done is some customers, 1 hive's enough. The 30, 40 pounds, 50 pounds, whatever honey they get, that's plenty for their 1 family. So what we're doing now, and what I should have done when I started, you live and you learn, now I'm putting business hives next to locations where there's 1 hive. And what that does is that gives me resources to keep that hive strong for the customer. And also, I'm busting up. My plan, I'd like to keep the 8 that are out in Mr. Burrows' field, because it's beautiful. I think it looks great. I don't know if y'all have driven by and looked at it. I kind of tapped myself on the back for that one. I was like, man, those look good. Now, next year they might. They might not look as pretty, but anyway. No, I'm not adding any more. If anything, I'm decreasing the ones at 200 South Carolina.
So the business aspect that you have of going to people and doing that, does that involve any, I don't know if this is the right terminology, but does that involve any cultivation of bees on your property to then take them to wherever they go?
No, so the bees that I have in the backyard, to be honest with you, I put my privacy fence up way before I had bees, and it's really frustrating to try and get bees and honey out of my backyard. Because as much as I like being in a full bee suit and toting about 50 pounds of honey in a box all the way through my yard to get through a gate, I don't like it. I'm not as young a man as I used to be. So no, I don't like to use my backyard bees for the business,
Okay.
other than honey.
So-
when I do pull honey. But, so what I typically use, like if and I've got the Basses are here, they have hives with us. If their hives were in trouble, I would go to the braze off of Burkhalter, because we've got about 20 hives out there. And it's a whole lot easier to get stuff out of those, because it's in a field with 60,
Right.
60 acres.
Okay. So Hugh, I have a question for you then, because it sounds like we have, the more that you've explained this, and first of all, I appreciate all the explanation, because this makes a whole lot more sense than the Facebook community. So that, you know, we're hearing it the way it's supposed to be. But the more I've heard, it's almost like we have two things happening here. Because and maybe I'm wrong, but we have one where he's keeping bees. We have that agricultural activity in our R1 zone. But it's also, and I could be wrong here, but there's also the aspect of a home-based business of, and I'm not talking about like selling the honey, but the bee management stuff that he does out of his house. So do we, you know, I mean, I guess the basic question is that business based in Brooklet at your house, or is it based out wherever you have your other building, you know,
Statesboro.
in the county or
You
whatever?
don't want to lose a bee business, do you? Statesboro's got enough.
Right, and I guess my question is if, you know, first of all, I'm all for the idea of the variance, as long as I can be assured
It's
that,
not variance now, that's.
or not the variance, the special
use.
exception.
Yeah.
I mean, I would be all for that as long as I can be assured that we don't get an accidental child exploring and, you know, putting themselves in, you know, or anybody
We
really.
just talked about it.
Yeah, but the other side of it is because he has this bee upkeep business, like you used the pool analogy, which is a good one.
So yeah, a pool or a lawn care service would be more in line with what we do.
Okay, so then does that mean he needs to register as a business
I think
inside?
it likely does if they approve it. I mean, it's an agricultural type business.
And I have no problem, you know, I have no problem signing up for a service business. I have no problem with that.
Because I think the route that needs to go is for them to begin the planning and zoning, and Randy's not here, so I don't know. Charlie, how, is that like a one meeting thing? Would that
He
require?
would make application, pay his fee. It would be advertised in the paper for 15 days. There would be a sign at his house. There's a special exception hearing on such and such a day. The Planning and Zoning Board would hear the application for special exception, special use exception on the scheduled day. And then the next month, council would hear it, because in between P and Z and the council hearing and final vote, there has to be another sign and another newspaper advertisement that, hey, P and Z has approved and council will hear an application for a special exception.
And there's time.
It's a 3-month process. The application and 15 days is more, usually that's the first month. So if he were to do the application tomorrow being the 17th,
17th.
Wouldn't make-
it could get in the paper through the first week of June, and it could be heard in June, I
Okay.
think.
Now,
And then-
PNC, you do have a meeting,
We already have a meeting on the 11th.
I thought it was the 10th.
Pick one. I don't know.
You know
It's-
what? I don't know
it's-
if that'll give him enough
Right,
time though.
I don't have the calendar, it's either the
Yeah.
10th or the
It's
11th.
the 10th or the 11th.
But he could, if the application was done soon,
Right.
he could make the timeline for that meeting, which would then bring his special, assuming it was approved, or, well,
Right,
actually,
right.
either way, approve or not, or recommend or not recommend, it would come before this council in July.
Because whether you just say yes or no,
It still comes here.
Yeah. So, Hugh, I don't know if it's appropriate, but if it's all right, I think I would like to make a motion or whatever that we grant them an extension of the letter that we sent them through September 1st.
Through the interim.
Provided that he files for a planning and zoning request before June 1st, that we grant him an exception till September 1st. Because part of it is,
I'll have it done either by tomorrow or Monday.
it's not his fault that we have to wait so many days.
Yeah, I think that's fine, but what, another thing that comes to mind, part of your operation is on somebody else's land, isn't it?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
I'm guessing, I think I'm right, this is off the top of my head, now sometimes I get in trouble with that, but I think the landowner is gonna have to be involved in that application. Probably both of you would have to apply, I think.
Can I just, yeah, let's,
Lori and Angie will look at that, but I think I'm telling you.
Shouldn't be no problem with that.
so, the bigger issue, the spraying aspect.
We'll continue with the way we're doing it.
So we're good.
We're good.
Perfect, thank you, thank you,
Yeah,
thank you.
until this gets figured out, and as part of the special exception, well, whether P and Z approves it or not, but when it eventually lands here for the next meeting, or for whatever meeting it's gonna be on, probably a couple months from now, then we can address the rules for the special exemption, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
And really, just for you mainly, the only section that's even of concern is waters to Cromley. Cromley is fair game. It's not an issue at all. It's way far enough away from the beehives to even be a concern.
Well, we're gonna maintain that 100.
That's fine, that's fine.
No, the beehives that's on Mr. Burrows' property, you said that those are far enough back.
I believe they are. You know, if you're not going down that dirt road, if that's in the no spray zone, then it's definitely far enough away. And honestly, I don't even know, because I know Miss Sherry has got her house for sale. She's not even in that house anymore. That's next to the lot. So
Your
down
highs
that dirt road.
Highs are 100 feet from the stop sign on Waters.
Yeah.
Out to your house.
I mean, obviously I'd rather not do it, but I know we have, you know, there is concerns with things that mosquitoes carry, and, you know, I don't wanna, be greedy about the section. It's really just that, you know, I don't want the community to suffer for it. So.
I certainly appreciate all the neighbors that came in tonight. It makes it a lot easier for us.
That's right.
Thank you.
We got a couple questions.
Could I ask a question?
Resolution on it.
How far from a residence should the house be?
Sir, I can't answer that question because of the,
I mean, is there a limit as to how close they can be to a house?
no, sir, because the bees are gonna travel miles. So as far as the hives being located next door to my house or anybody
I
else.
think that would come at the recommendation of the special exemption, that they would
I
have to
think
be.
so, and let me say
So
this,
as a,
go ahead.
the distance of a beehive really depends on the bees. As beekeepers, we call them hot hives. And you know, everybody who's not a beekeeper, oh, they're Africanized. No, sometimes it's mean. Some hives are just mean. Me as a responsible beekeeper, I would not have a hot hive anywhere in Brooklet. I have a couple hot hives, and they're in quarantine basically. They're way off in the distance, and they're on a lot of land by themselves. And so, to that point, you could have a beehive. My backyard's not big, and they've coexisted with us for, you know, for
Didn't
4
you have
years.
them on your porch for a little while?
No, those were empty boxes.
Oh, okay.
That was before we built the honey house.
Okay.
That was before we had the massive investment in a, 500 square foot
I would
village.
drive past there and go, boy, that looks awesome.
Okay, so the first.
Well, wait, we got one more question here.
Yeah, I want to ask Mr. Hunter a question. I'm a beekeeper right down the road from him. I just have 2 hives, but I'm about 200 yards off. Now, is this zoning you're talking about just going to affect everybody with bees, or just somebody that's running a business?
Because there are a lot of beekeepers in Brooklet City Limits.
We do have several different
Because
beekeepers.
I don't have a problem spraying. I mean, because I'm so far off the road. And I was just, he mentioned a while ago about mosquito issue. It was, I think it was 47 cases last year of just a West Nile virus in the state of Georgia. So we need to be spraying. We need to do that. So we need to kind of handle this in a certain way that we need to do both situations. But my question to you is, do I need a zone too? I mean, I'm not selling it. I just do it for my own personal use. And I'm 200 yards off there.
Seems like you're gonna do it for
Mr.
one,
Hunter,
you do it for
before
all.
you answer that, can I piggyback on his?
Sure.
In your definition of beekeeping as an agricultural activity, I see where you're coming from. But in my thoughts on this through the week, how is this different as an agricultural activity? How is this different from backyard chickens? Oh, hold on,
Well, this would be my-
or a fruit tree, or a pecan tree. It's not an inert product, but you're producing a product which would occur anyway without human involvement. And I think, I mean, I see the difference, bees, trees, I got it. But as an agricultural activity, I have 9 pecan trees.
Well, this is
What,
the way I
is
would
that
look at it.
agriculture?
This is the way, I have thought about that, and that is an excellent question. And is, we lawyers don't live in the world of black and white, we live in the world of gray. And the way the ordinance reads, you can have an accessory use that is customarily incidental to a residential use. What does that mean? I think it really depends on the circumstance. It's not a black and white issue.
I would agree.
All right, so there's nothing in the ordinance that says, well, if you've got a residence, you can have a dog. It doesn't say that. It says you can have uses customarily incidental to a residential use. Is a dog, a pet, customarily incidental to a residential use? I'd say sure. They're dogs, you know, that's, in the human experience, people who have houses often have a dog as a pet.
Somebody wanted to raise gators, they
All right.
never make it.
But what if you start taking in dogs and you got a bunch of them you're taking in and you're charging a fee for keeping dogs? Well, that's not just having a pet.
And the ordinance addresses
You're getting
that.
into it, that's not customarily incidental to a residential use.
I would agree.
Say you got a garden, you know, it's probably customary to a residential use to have a few tomato bushes out in a small vegetable garden, but if you start having a big garden and selling vegetables around, that's not customarily incidental to a residential use. So I would say it's not a black and white issue, it's a matter of degree, I think. But certainly having to the degree he's got, and it is a business, I mean, he said it's a business.
And I
That would be
considered,
customary to a residential use.
right, I considered there was really no argument to the business aspect of it, other than, you know, me and my pecans. I do sell pecans, you know, license me if you want, but it's you know, the trees came with the house. They're there. I can't eat them all. I sell my excess.
Right.
So,
It could be a medical facility because it treats my son's allergies.
His question brings up something that way back when this started, I mentioned, is that if we have, all of a sudden, every other block in the city, we have a beekeeper, maybe exaggerating a little bit, but we have
I don't know.
a few beehives here and a few beehives here, and we start cutting off.
You won't
the
have that
mosquito-
problem.
We start cutting off the mosquito spraying for the beehives or the, whatever it is that they're raising. All of a sudden, we got a real challenge in our city to service our residents that want spraying for mosquitoes. So how do we, what's our limit?
Well, I think to go back to Hugh's example, we have an ordinance, and I don't remember exactly what the provisions are, but it says something like if you're in the city, you can't have more than like 3 or 4 dogs. We have
Yes.
it's written 3. Okay, so there's something written there. I think I think what needs to happen, and he's even offered some assistance, is it might be that in his case, we're talking about one end, and in his case, we're talking about the other end. That maybe what we need to do is we need to go through and get the special exemption and the business side of this figured out. And then maybe we have a work session one day and we invite him and you and anybody else who has hobby bees, I guess is a good way to say it, and come up with something, and anybody else who wants to come up with an ordinance that says, you know, because this is sort of like what the City of Savannah ordinance has, but if you have property that's this big, we're going to limit you to this many bees, and this is the provisions that's going to occur with spraying. And if you choose to operate that hobby, then you choose to live with that, you know, with
So-
those rules.
so,
But in your case, you would have.
I talked to a beekeeper that's been doing this a long time, and he looked into our situation, and so going back to the spraying part, how Georgia law writes it, so if I'm quoting this right, is any city or municipality that is spraying has to notify all beekeepers within 24 hours by phone call for us to be able to cover our hives.
Right.
Right. But you have to be registered with the city.
Correct.
To do that.
Correct.
So.
So what once we get everything settled down, I would love to sit on a panel. I think it'd probably be a good idea to, you probably should know who has beehives. That would be a good thing the city should know. But that being said, there needs to be more communication of, hey, just so you know, tomorrow at, I don't know how you do it, a robocall, whatever.
We send it out by text message.
That would work, but if I knew exactly that you were coming, I could get in my backyard and throw sheets over my hives. But the way the wording of that initial letter was, it was like, what if I'm on a business trip? What if, it's, and I don't know it's raining, it's, and then my hives have been covered for 2 days,
Yeah, and we can work with our public works staff to be able to say, at 5 o'clock, we are anticipating to spray tonight. And, then that's 3 hours, or at least 3 hours before. But, 24 hours may not work because the weather changes.
They get ready to leave the shop though, if that wind's blowing over 10 miles an hour, they're not gonna spray.
But if we teach them how to do it, they can say, due to weather, we've canceled our spray. I mean, I think communication is gonna be the key.
Yeah,
And,
communication is
and
gonna
we
be
could
the
even
key.
set up, if we have a bunch of registered beekeepers, I mean, I don't know if this is, I mean, there's ways, we can figure that out. But I think what we need to do is go through the special exemption, planning and zoning piece, get the business license piece, well, I guess that would come after he gets the exemption,
Right.
because that, up
What
until
he needs
now.
to do now is just file.
Yeah.
That'll get filed.
And then after we get your case figured out, then we get with you and anyone else who wants to be part of it and come up with what will work citywide.
Why don't we give him a copy of that, I think it's gonna be tabled tonight, but the ordinance, we're modeling after the
Yeah.
Savannah ordinance.
So
Let him look at it and see if,
speaking on that, I can answer one thing. I heard that it was gonna require that you be a licensed beekeeper. Is that something that was in the
No.
verbiage? Okay, good, because I heard wrong.
Says that.
But there
you
is,
have to, it required registration.
okay, so
you
with
know
the
if
state,
you are.
is that through the state registration? Is
Well,
that-
only if, I think if I understand the state statute correctly, if you are, what is it, selling the.
If you're selling bees across state lines. So, just so you know,
I think it was even.
well, just so you know, a couple years, 2 years ago, I was looking into it. Cause I stopped using my supplier for bees for the backyard installation. And, I called the inspector and I said, I'd like for you to come inspect my hive so I can be registered as to sell bees. He said, how many hives do you have? I said, I got 30. He said, you'd be a waste of my time. So he said, you're not big enough, don't come, I'm not, he said, make sure you sell healthy bees, don't have anybody complain. For that person to get a beehive, because they're not gonna go through the registration portion to be, an inspector's not gonna come inspect one hive.
Well, here's what I understand the state statute says. Section, if you wanna write it down, is 2-14-4. Requires all beekeepers that are selling bees, queens, nuclei, etc. to be commercially licensed. And that's through the state, that would be through the city. But if you're just a hobbyist or you're a honey producer, you don't have to register with the state or be licensed with the state. That's how I understand it.
Yeah, but I think if you put that verbiage in, you're not gonna have a lot of, people just aren't going to beekeeping as something they wanna do. Trust me, I've been doing it for 4 years. I went through 6 partners before I found Scott. They lasted about 2 months. And they said, heck with this. I'm not doing this. So, people are all gung-ho and they all wanna get into it,
Well, here,
but
why
they're
don't
not.
you get a copy of that and look
Yeah.
at it? You can
Yeah.
have some input.
So, thank you. I'm good.
Oh, you've already got,
Yeah.
you got one?
But yeah, I mean, I would love to sit down and help writing it out.
Anyone else want a copy of it? Because we got several up here if y'all want a copy.
Thank you.
And if there's anything we want to change or look at.
Mr. Mayor?
Charlie Howard, you want to say something on these?
I just wanted to add, because there's been a lot of discussion and covered a lot of ground. One thing that came up a couple of times was when you do turn off the fogger, there's an area which is not being treated for mosquitoes. So I burned the midnight oil a little earlier in the week and did some math. 150 feet of Lewis Street, if the cloud moves 200 feet, that's 20,000 square feet of lost coverage. The city of Brooklet is 3.4 miles, that's 94 million square feet, or 5 thousandths of 1% of the area of Brooklet that we're not killing skeeters. And if you look at it in terms of roadway, somewhere around 20, 23 miles of roadway, 150 feet, it is
Very small.
0.9%, or 0.9%.
0.09%.
I'm sorry?
0.09%, I think.
Yes, thank you, 0.09%. So, for people who struggle with numbers, actually like me, if Brooklet was a stack of $10,000 bills, we're discussing on the roads a $100 bill, or in terms of total area, a nickel. It's really, now I just looked at Mr. Dinello. I don't know about the other beehives. That is a concern. But just this instance, gracious, that's a very minuscule portion.
Okay, well, it's doable.
And you'll want to see Lori here. She's the planning and zoning administrator. She'll get you the application and tell you all the things and all that. Now, do we need to vote on that extension till September?
Probably should, yeah.
Okay, then I'll go ahead and make a motion that,
Wait, Nancy, just a second.
oh yeah, well, the tape's still going, right? Oh, she probably needs to write it down.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll be back in just a second. Mr. Ballett, you want to say something, Doug?
Yes, sir. Originally came, my name is Robert Mallett. I'm a resident in the Winnie Brook subdivision. Originally came because of the discussion of the bees and the ordinance. Of all the issues that we have in the town, I thought the bees were small potatoes or small peanuts.
Yeah.
I'm glad that Mr. Hunter has offered a path to a compromise that appears to satisfy everybody involved, and I congratulate you all for that. If down the road, if it goes south, and you gotta lose your bees, once the new proposed ordinance is approved, I'm willing to foster parent a colony for you. No benefit to me, okay? So,
Can you freeload right now?
You would get rent paid with honey.
no benefit to me, it's free.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind. If you gotta lose your hives, that I'm willing to apply for a new permit and take on one of your colony.
Thank you.
There you go.
Thank you, Mayor.
Very nice.
Thank you, sir. Keith Howard?
That was bees.
Yes, you was talking about the bees?
No, do bees.
You don't do bees?
No, sir.
Well, you ought to get you some. You should start.
You need more stress in your life.
Honey sweetens a lot of stuff.
It does.
Naturally.
He's in the honey wagon business. Yeah, I'm in the honey wagon.
That's right. Barney,
I'm good.
you next on the list. You good?
I'm good.
Okay, Mr. Barney. While our secretary's out for just a minute, we'll breathe.
You want me to talk about what I'm here, I can real quick. But it ain't got to do with the bees.
Well, you on the agenda to talk about something else?
Yeah.
Is it gonna take a, what's he talking about?
Talking about you.
Go ahead. Anything talking about me?
I'm Keith Howard. cousin, Gilbert. But, you know, you all know that law enforcement, has to have the help of the citizens, and, fire department, you know, if you're the arson or whatever. So we don't have a real established neighborhood watch program anywhere in this county. So I've got the Portals, city, Register City, Brooklet, Lee, and we're getting up some neighborhood watch programs. So, June the 14th, Brooklet's gonna have a little community thing over here at the Randy Union.
What was that date?
June the 14th, Lee's getting it all up. And, we gonna set you up if you want a neighborhood watch program for your neighborhood that you live in, homeowner association, church, civic group, anybody that wants us to come, you know, make this program. It's a little short program on how you can get registered. The benefits of having it, you know, kinda like Mr. Dinello was talking about, he didn't know his neighbors like he should. Neighborhood watch gets you involved with your neighborhood, your neighbors. You're walking in the afternoons, you just notice certain things, and it helps law enforcement out if you have a burglary or, you know, any kind of theft. So, Portal's gonna have everything, we had one registered. Lee's gonna have these flyers, Mary have them. Y'all get in touch, the number's on here, we'll be glad to have a program for you if y'all are interested. Thank you.
That's good.
Do you have one of those? Because we've been sending a text message summary of the meeting to all the residents who've signed up for that, and I can include information on that.
Yeah, I'm gonna give these to Lee, you can have them.
Oh, here, I'll just take one. You can give the rest to Lee.
Okay.
And that's just another thing. If you live in the city of Brooklet and you are not on the text message system, right outside, it's still right out there, right?
Yes, it is.
Right
Sign-up
outside
sheets are
the
on
counter
board
there
out there.
are how you sign up, and you will be notified of different things that happen when we can happen. And we try not to blow it up too bad, but we're trying to use that more and more to communicate with people. So if you live in the city of Brooklet and you have a cell phone, which pretty much is everybody now, you really need to sign up for that service. And if you don't live in the city, you can, but
And also too, we took the front entrance and, put up like a community board. So if there's anything you wanna put on it, you can bring in and put on it. Right now, we've got all the election information that's gonna be coming up in November. The dates to, qualify, the qualifying fees, and little packet. And if you decide you wanna run, then it also has a little packet in there that tells you what to do, how to come into City Hall and whatnot.
One favor I'd like to ask everybody, if you have a garage sale and you put up some signs pointing the directions, when you're done with your garage sale, please take your signs down.
Get rid of it.
Appreciate that.